and welcome to the Life Skills Summit. My name is Sonia Barlow. I happen to be the CEO and founder of this amazing network called the LMF Network, which stands for like-minded females or like-minded friends or life mentorship and friendship, depending on who you are and what we pitch to you. We're really excited to have everyone join us from across the world. So far, over the last few days, we've had over 1,000 people join these really magnificent conversations around life skills, professional skills, leveling ourselves up, and just becoming our best versions of who we are in our career. If you don't know the great work we do, the LMF Network started in 2018 as a brunch club and converted into a social model in 2020. We're on a mission to build the careers and confidence of women professionally and globally through networking, masterclasses, mentorship, amazing resources, and just making sure that we are setting ourselves up for success. And the most exciting thing is that we are finally launching an app, or at least I hope we are. We built it last year, we got scared, we slept on it. And now actually the time has come to fail fast, to learn, to gain feedback, and to make sure that we are making this community an established model all over the world. But the reason why we're holding this summit is because new research has come out to show that soft skills and the lack of professional skills in the workplace is costing the workforce over £22 billion. It's a lot of money that we are scrapping away. And the average earner can increase their pay by a minimum of 5K just by investing in their soft skills and professional development. We've also had numerous people message and ask us questions like, what skills do we need? Do we need to be a coder if we want to make money? How do we tap into our communication skills, especially when we don't know what we don't know because we've just entered the world of work? So for that reason, we have amazing panelists who are going to genuinely change your lives and share their beautiful insights. I'm definitely not going to do justice by giving them the introduction. So I'm going to really empower Maya, Sarah, and Alyssa to do their introductions, their 30-second pitches, and tell us a little bit about their career journeys and what they're bringing to the panel today. So thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Hi, everyone. I'm Maya Welford. I'm really excited to be here and sharing the stage with these two wonderful women, Alyssa and Sarah, and also Sonia. Thank you so much for having me. So, yeah, I work at Barclays within behavioral finance. I've been at Barclays for 5 years. This week is actually my 5-year anniversary, which is a bit scary. Thank you. Outside of work, I have my own podcast called That's My Name. So I explore name-related stories from guests from around the world. So I've been hosting my podcast for 2 years, and I also do some coaching and development workshops outside of work as well. Sarah, over to you.
Thanks, Maya, and thank you so much for having me on this amazing panel. So I'm Sarah McNee. I have been with IBM for 10 years in human resources as well as communication. I spent just over 3 years in the HR communications team, so very passionate about the power and importance of communications. I'm currently based in New Jersey in the US, so hello from over the pond to many of you, and just excited to get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elisa Jaffer. I am a senior communications manager at Deliveroo. We're an online food tech company that operates in 10 markets around the world. Prior to joining Deliveroo, I was working for a higher education company managing their content team. And my background is in journalism. So I'm actually a bit of a mix of Sarah and Maya. Started my professional journey in California after graduating from the University of California, Berkeley. Started as an investigative reporter, came over to London to study my master's in journalism, and has led me down the path of content marketing and communications. So just to reiterate, I'm so humbled and pleased to be on this panel. My special thanks to Sonia for having me and inviting me, and I'm really excited to share our insights on communications with you all.
No, thank you. And, you know, I always think it's so amazing that we are working with professional women like yourself all over the world, also with these big brand names like IBM, Deliveroo, Barclays. I'm sorry, these are like household names that we grew up with, right? So not only do we work there, but now we're talking about our experiences, and also we're advocating that we can actually be the change. And especially when you can't see the change, well, it doesn't matter because the doors may not be open for you, but you can make sure that you can create those access points, which, you know, Maya, you're doing with your podcast, Sarah, you're doing with the amazing work that you have going on behind the scenes, and Lisa, you do with even your article writing, which I see that you do from a freelancer perspective. So it's really about how we use those natural communication skills in our own shape and form to form the careers and also to shift the careers. There's so much talk about the shortage of skills. And unfortunately, what we find is they usually mean digital and tech skills, but there's also a gap when it comes to softer skills. Now, softer skills is a weird subject area. I don't like the term softer skills. I'm like, they're not soft. If anything, communication skills are really hard. Okay, there are so many different cultures. There's so many different names. It's really hard to communicate. But in the tech-driven world, what we find, especially from an LMF standpoint, is we get a lot of questions like, do we need to be a coder or do we need to be a communicator? And I'm like, that's not fair. It's like saying, do we need to do maths or art? You can do both. You can celebrate both and exist together. But also, I'm kind of going to be quite controversial. I don't necessarily think coding is the future of the world. I don't. When you have tools like AI and you have machine learning and you have and other kind of technical parts coming through, it's not that we need to code. It's that we need to learn how to communicate that code. It's that we need to learn how to communicate to one another. And also, Amaya, you know this better than anyone because you've got a master's in it. We need to make sure our communication is key in our decision-making and data so that we can feed it into the code that we're building. So on that note, my first question to everyone is, how can professionals strike a balance between soft professional skills like communications and technical skills like coding? But most importantly, how can those strong communication skills really set us apart and enhance our careers compared to those pure technical skills, which are important? But the question is, are they as important? So Sarah, I'm going to come to you first. Then Lisa, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to appreciate that I might pronounce your name wrong correctly.
So I would start by saying that just as important, the what of what we deliver or the outcomes we achieve, that's the what, right? That's just as important as how it got done. So if you're the most amazing coder, but you don't know how to communicate your message, you don't know how to team with others, you don't know how to build trust with others, you don't know how to be open to feedback and improve yourself. We're human, we're not perfect, right? So the what and the how go hand in hand. I talk about this on a daily basis with managers that I coach around the business, right? So for me, it's communication is table stakes. Being good at communication, verbal, written, your body language as you're working with other people, absolutely essential. I don't necessarily look at it as a soft skill. It is a skill. So I don't even use that terminology a lot myself, right? But just as important as the what is, how is the work getting done? How are you working with other individuals, be it clients, be it partners, be it teammates? You have to be able to work with all those different people. So I'll start there.
Yeah, really great point, Sarah. I think building on what you and Sonia have set up so well, communication is something that you learn from when you're a baby. It's such a basic skill, and the level of communication changes as you develop and as you grow. It's very much a learned skill. It's not anything that any of us are innately born with. Rather, it's almost like a muscle that if you exercise it, if you practice it, it'll get stronger and you'll get better at it. And it's not just kind of this anecdotal evidence that we know why communication is important. It's also backed up by research. So McKinsey did a research study of in Germany recently of hundreds of job adverts and employers as well, and found actually that the demand for specific tech skills has drastically shifted over the past 5 years. And what that means is that tech skills are actually becoming obsolete quite quickly. And Sonia touched on this, that with new technologies constantly arriving, AI, machine learning, that's generative AI, that's very much kind of top of mind now. A few years ago, that wasn't the case. So because tech is changing so rapidly, learning those skills and making that your only focus almost pigeonholes you in a way that will limit your career growth. Whereas communication has a lot longer term value, the study found. Communication is something that you can use to build on your career at every stage of your professional growth. And as well, communication is a really key skill for leadership. You all might be familiar with the billionaire Richard Branson. He actually wrote in a blog post that communication is the most important skill in leadership. So if you really are eyeing kind of the C-suite or becoming an entrepreneur, really rising through the ranks in your career, communication is absolutely going to be a timeless skill that will only become more important the more senior you go. Whereas technical skills, coding, engineering, software development, those kinds of things almost have a bit of an expiration date, and you'll constantly need to upskill.
Yeah, I think I agree with kind of both all the points that have been made so far. What I would say is, like, within a business context, there are lots and lots of roles where it is now growing importance to have skills like data analytics and so on. And that's really important. And I think it's great that so many people are proactively trying to upskill in the kind of data and analytics space. I think what is really important to remember when it comes to communication is being able to communicate those ideas and those findings. So if you've done a piece of data analytics and you've drawn out some insights, how can you then translate them to the audience that you're working with? Now, this is really crucial because we have, business leaders within organizations who are probably not that technical because they are bigger picture. So being able to translate the findings in an easily understandable way is really, really crucial, because these leaders are making the decisions, they're signing off budgets. So if you're not able to communicate the value add of, the work that you're doing or the idea that you're pitching, you're not necessarily going to get the budget and the backing to take forward your work and your project. So I think it's really important to be able to communicate your ideas and your insights to then secure that budget and get those decisions made. But what I would also say is, Sarah, I know you want to jump in 1 second. What I would also say is there are also people who are very technical and that's all they want to do. And that's also fine. So I think that there's definitely place for, all different sorts of people within the organizations. And for some people, communication skills may come less naturally, and maybe they are very much comfortable within just that very technical realm. And that's also fine. So I think it's important to call that out too.
I'd just like to build on that too, that communications can be a differentiator for you, especially if you're looking for leadership opportunities, right? Being able to clearly communicate the outcome of an organization, of a team, and a goal for a team member, right? All comes down to being an articulate and effective communicator. I would also say that communication is not a destination. This is a lifelong skill. So when I was working in HR communications, I had an amazing manager, and she helped me realize that even though I was new to communications, I can always be building my skills, and to be able to cross-reference my drafts with peers, with other leaders, to really start gut checking, do I have the right tone? So it's something that you need to have a growth mindset going into building your communication skills. You're never going to arrive at being the best communicator. You have to constantly be working on those skills and be humble on that journey that you are not perfect, right? And that we always have something to learn when it comes to either external communications and PR or internal communications regarding employees.
I think one thing to note there, and before I go on to that, thank you so much. We have people joining from London. We have people joining from America. We have people joining from Mexico. I mean, I'm glad that we are global. One thing I want to ask is, when we say the word communication, what does it mean to you? Because I think a lot of the response that I'm getting, at least what I'm assuming, is when we say communication, it's about speaking skills. But actually, I think communication skills are a lot more than that. I might be a very good speaker. I can speak publicly. But if you ask me to write a professional email, I will think over it for days and days and days, and I'll still get it wrong, right? And then if you ask me to write a blog, oh my God, I've written a book, and I find blog writing the most difficult thing sometimes. So it's also about how you communicate and what mediums you are using. So if we go back to the folks who are technical, they need to be able to communicate what they're thinking in code. They need to communicate that to the translator, which is, the team rep, in layperson terms, so that the translator can then take it to people who aren't technical per se. So communication skills for them doesn't necessarily have to be spoken word. It could be how you write the messaging. Whereas when I was in consultancy and I was a translator, the reason why sometimes communication skills were detrimental was because I remember a client came to us and was like, we want you to build this project. I was like, yeah, don't worry, it'll take 3 days. I went to my technical team like, it will take 3 weeks. I was like, oh, will it? I'm so sorry. So none of us communicated really well, right? And so then what's that detrimental? It's detrimental for the business. And yet equally myself, as someone who leads a community, you have to be able to communicate. But what medium do you use it? Is it a newsletter? Is it a blog? Is it a panel? Is it an event like this? Is it digital? Is it public speaking? Is it in the background? So before we go on to the questions that we shared, I'd love to know, when you think about communication, what is one of the first mediums that come to mind? And do you think, therefore, you have your own biases when you come into a topic like communication, right? Because I think it's quite worldly. And I'm gonna kind of leave whoever wants to jump in first to jump in there, and also invite the audience who are listening and joining us, please, to ask questions.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to jump in. It's such a good point that you make, Sonia. For me, what comes to mind when I think about communication skills is actually a blend of different modes of communication. So it's definitely the public speaking and presenting and that kind of using your voice. That's definitely a main one for me. And I think in the world of work, that's a really, really highly valued skill, to be able to verbally get your ideas and points across. But then also I think things like, posting on LinkedIn, I think that's a really great communication tool in terms of, building out your brand and communicating to your audience, like what you're about, and building your own community. So I think, it's not just all kind of in person, but there's also the digital element as well.
I think building on that, for me, communication really comes down to submitting and receiving a message in whatever form that takes. So at its very basic, if I do that, I've not said anything, but I've communicated a message and you've received it, which makes it an effective communication. The challenge that we have now is that in our digital world, we have so many different channels, and all of those different channels of communication leave space for miscommunication. So what I would say is the most important thing to keep in mind in order to deliver an effective communication is to always keep your audience in mind and be as clear as possible and as simple as possible in transmitting that message. So that's kind of where the channels come into it, where you think, okay, I might want to tell Sarah that I really enjoyed the response that she gave on the panel. What might be the best way for me to do that? I could leave her a voice note. I could send her a text. I could send her a Slack message. I could write a document. I could put it on social media. I could write her a letter. I could give her a telegram. There's so many different channels. But if I think more clearly about what type of communication might Sarah want to receive, I know Slack is a channel that she really resonates with. That is probably the best way for me to send that message to her in the easiest and quickest way possible for her to receive the message that I'm trying to transmit.
So first of all, I'd like to say I will take snail mail any day. So if you want to write me a letter about this panel, I would welcome that. That would feel so cool to get a letter from London. But on a serious note, I completely agree that understanding the preference of the individual that you're working with is super important, right? That's really taking a tailored, personalized approach to how am I trying to connect with that individual. At the end of the day, communication is about connection. Are you building a connection, an authentic, thoughtful connection that this other individual, wherever they're located in the world, are going to resonate with or want to take action? When it comes to internal communications, a lot of times we're focused on telling someone to do something, but why are we telling them to do it? What is the purpose behind said email communication that we're sending out to thousands of employees? Right? So helping that individual connect with the purpose. Why is taking this action going to help them? So I would say in any communications, whatever platform you're choosing for that to best work with that individual, think about the why in that message. What is the purpose of you interrupting their day, for a very, lack of a better term? How are you helping them in reaching out to them? I would also say that Slack is the medium that comes to mind immediately for me because I work on a global team. So a lot of times I'm not shoulder to shoulder with a teammate. I'm actively working on a project. So although I'm going into the office, I'm still working virtually with people in nearby offices in other countries. So being really skilled at how do I craft this Slack message quickly and efficiently, but how am I using the right tone, right? I'm not just sending a Slack that says, Maya, where are you? That's, to me, that sounds aggressive, right? So it's always helpful to gut check with yourself. If I was on the receiving end of said message, how would I read this, right? Versus really just softening up that tone, which we have to do a lot of times in written communication, because so much goes on when you're in person and you can read facial cues. You can sense when to interrupt or when to jump in on something when it's appropriate versus written in Slack or in an email. So very long-winded answer, but I would say be really thoughtful, not only about what are the preferences of the individual that you're communicating or connecting with, but also be thoughtful on that tone that you're coming across.
Maya, you mentioned that it was your 5 years this week, which is amazing. But on that note, I think based on what both you other panelists have shared, communication is queen. And we've had users say communication is the password to life. We need to be able to communicate. It's connection. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of sharing your message. Now, we're not, even though we're raised on how to communicate, we're not born with great communication skills. It is really difficult. So Maya, before we get onto your podcast and the premise of storytelling, and I know that when you came on the LMF podcast, you say, if you want to build your communication skills, start a podcast. I think even before we get to that, it's you're looking to get a job. It's your first 10 days at work. It's your first 3 months at work. How do you build the confidence to communicate? How do you learn those professional communication skills, which, Sarah, though you've said it all, it kind of feels a little bit coded. It feels a bit jaded. It's like, where's the guide and rule book? Like, I come from, I don't have a poker face. So unfortunately, that might be meaning that I might be like really happy, but my face is like, right? So if you're taking my tone, well, my tone differs from my body language. Or you may be having a rubbish day, or you may come from an Asian background where you've been taught to be calm and quiet and, lean into your like softer self and not look at people in the eyes, but actually looking into people's eyes is a form of communication. I know when I was in the workplace, I didn't look at my managers in the eyes because I looked at their chest because I was respectful. And they were like, you don't want to communicate with us. I was like, but I do. I want to be your best friend. But they were like, no, because you're not looking at our eyes. And I think the point being is there's a lot of hidden rules and secrets that we don't know when it comes to communication. So Maya, and then to all the other panelists, how do you build up your first set of guidelines for communication, the confidence that you need to understand how to navigate the workplace?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, I think, especially, when you're just starting out in your career or also maybe in a new industry or a new organization. It's, different organizational cultures within themselves will have different ways of kind of communication, even down to like using Slack. We don't use Slack at my workplace, but Sarah, you use it a lot with the work that you do. So even if I joined Sarah's organization, I would have no idea how to use Slack and then have to kind of upskill. So that's like one, I guess, small example. But in terms of like communicating within the workplace and finding that confidence to communicate, it takes time. You might be someone naturally who is maybe a bit more introverted and less comfortable with communicating openly. And that was definitely the case for me when I first joined. Actually, in my internship around 6 or 7 years ago, I was doing an internship. And again, I have a Japanese mom, so kind of Asian background, very high, like very much like respect your elders, hierarchical, that sort of thing. So I came into this massive organization doing my internship, and I was like, this is really overwhelming. Like, I just want to be really quiet because I felt like I have no value to add. All these people have way more experience than me. I'm just an intern. Like, I'm just going to be quiet. So I think it was like that lack of confidence, which led to me to not necessarily speak up during meetings, which then led to and I've shared this quite often on different panels, is at the end of my internship, leader of the wider team was like, Maya, yeah, I've heard from people that you've done great work, but I actually haven't heard you speak for the internship, and you're like you're a wallflower and you're never going to be a leader. And I think definitely like not okay, like not cool. And I'm like, I happily call that out now, because I'm like, and that's a whole other topic of like people in leadership and powerful positions saying stuff to more junior colleagues, and it can really kind of perhaps damage their self-esteem, and also that could have knocked my confidence. But for me, I was like, actually, I'm just going to use that as fuel. But I think it's really important to remember that, you know, stick to yourself and stick to what you're comfortable with. But equally, there are going to be situations that challenge you. So how can you kind of comfortably challenge yourself to push a bit further? And, you know, within the workplace, as we've said, communication is so important in whatever form that may be. That is just how the workplace is. So I think it's definitely something around finding your role models, finding those people that you do look up to. And you might think, oh, I really like how this person communicated in that meeting. Or actually, I didn't really like how this person communicated in this email. So I think it's then when you're very, very junior or early on into a company or your career, it's identifying those role models, but equally identifying those people who maybe you don't necessarily look up to, and don't replicate them, and obviously kind of try and replicate those role models. And then it comes on to the whole like mentorship piece as well, which Sonia, I know you're really big on. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
It's super interesting, and we've had a great comment from Tanya that says, I think it's really difficult as well for new professionals who may be 100% remote or hybrid working to miss the nuances of office etiquette and communications and how to inter-departments communicate. You're hearing this a lot at the moment, so are we. Alyssa, that brings me on to yourself, and I'm very mindful I keep mispronouncing your name. So publicly, how do you say it so I can make sure that I navigate?
It's Elisa. Like if you're struggling to remember that,
it is Elisa, but I'm very sorry, and I think that's the reason I say that publicly is because that's the first form of communication, and I think it's about being really honest about, you know, I keep mispronouncing it. I'm very sorry, but correct me, and not to take offense by it. And I know Maya, you're really big on that, and everyone is too. But you are a communications manager. Now, with all due respect, what does that mean? Does that mean that you are, you know, do you wear a crown? Do you have like the certification? Are you like the person to go to? I mean, not only how do you become a communications manager, but given that you work for a company like Deliveroo and you have different people in different places, literally in different locations that you have to communicate with. And like you mentioned at the beginning, you used to work in a different country, and now you're in a different country. That's a lot for anyone to get their head around. How did you, one, navigate that process? And two, what are some of the learnings that you've taken away when it comes to the communication gaps, especially with diverse teams and diverse consumers? And I use the word diverse here because what we're trying to just say is people are different, and you know, everyone, let's celebrate the differences.
Yeah, great question, and great point from Tanya there too. For me, I think you know, as I mentioned before, communication is very much a skill. It's a muscle that can be trained. So if you're able to put in the time at the gym and work a lot on your physical fitness, the same way you can do with learning. And just touching on Maya's response there as well, there are so many ways that you can actually learn to become a better communicator. So for me, what was really important were a few of the things that Maya mentioned there, of seeking out mentorship and seeking out feedback, both constructive feedback and positive feedback proactively, that could help me then reflect on when I wanted to communicate this message. Did it land? Did it come across? Because I know what I'm trying to say, but if I didn't communicate that effectively, it may not have been received the way that I intended. The culture shock, I think, from moving from the US to the UK, it actually surprised me quite a lot. I thought, you know, English is a language that I've spoken my whole life. Although I'm multilingual, English is the language that I studied in, so there should be no issue with me coming to the UK, also a English-speaking country. But there are so many cultural nuances, Sonia, that were surprising to me as an American. The American style of communication is very direct. It's kind of in your face. People are quite friendly, whereas in the UK, there's a lot that goes unsaid. And I had to actively seek out that feedback and also be alerted about my blind spots in those areas by people who I trusted, people like my partner, people like colleagues, managers, to help me almost kind of see what I wasn't able to see, because we're all a product of the culture that we've been brought up in. But I think the awareness is so key. So if you're aware, and all of us have this, all of us have blind spots, all of us have things that we can work on, Sarah mentioned that communication is a skill that's a lifelong skill. It's something that we're going to keep building and keep improving. If you're aware of that, that's the first step. And then you can take active steps towards improving that. Mentorship is another great area. So, and learning is so important. So all of you all who are listening to this panel, simply by tuning in, by being involved with LMF, by seeking out a mentor, you're already taking active steps towards improving your communication. In terms of kind of strategies in communicating effectively with diverse teams, I have 4 tips for everyone. So if you've got a notebook and pen, here's the time. I'm going to get you busy. So for me, I think the first is to meet your audience where they are. All of us have different levels of competence and experience and skills and levels where we are. And that just amplifies when you're working with the global team the way that I do at Deliveroo. We work with 10 different markets, used to be 12, from Hong Kong, Australia, Netherlands, France, Belgium, Middle East, UK, Ireland, Qatar, Singapore, all over the world, really. So meeting my audience where they are, my stakeholders in each of those markets, is really important for me to be able to communicate with them effectively. But not just in terms of their cultural context or their time zone or the language that they're most comfortable speaking in. It's also about their motivation, their needs, their desires. What is it that they might be needing and wanting from me at that moment? How can I support them in meeting that need and tailoring my communication so that I can position myself as a form of support, a facilitator, rather than just another stakeholder that they have to manage or another person telling them that they have to complete a certain task. My second tip is that context matters. So it's really important to be mindful and to empathize with your audience, the person that you're communicating with. The way that the human mind works is that we're all selfish to a degree. We're all kind of thinking from our own viewpoint. But when you communicate, it's equally as important to think about your receiver. What is the context of that person? What is their viewpoint? And put yourself in their shoes. Think literally from their viewpoint. What is it that they might need? And take into account the context. So for me, working with the Asia teams, I've had to learn to schedule my messages on Slack so that I'm not messaging them out of hours, or be more accommodating by waking up a bit earlier and starting my day earlier to have a meeting with them and have some face-to-face time with them on a video call so that they're not working late into their evening just to meet me where I am, because we're a team that are based in London. We're a company that are based in the UK. So it kind of also speaks to that first point about meeting your audience where they are. The context matters, and really think about the value that you can add by putting yourself in the shoes of the receiver. My third tip is connection is key. I think actually Sonia said it better. She said connection is queen, which I love. So might be changing it to that one. It's really important to build relationships, even virtually. It's really important to be authentic, be human, be yourself. All of us have that in common, really. And human connection is really what we have in common with one another. Even if I'm speaking to someone on the other side of the world, ultimately we have some fundamental things in common. Things like humor, the fact that we all make mistakes, the fact that we work at the company. There's a lot more there on a human level that we have in common. So building that connection is really important. And sometimes all it takes is a bit of interest from your side to get to know them as an individual rather than kind of an anonymous person that you're working with. And it's really easy to think of our customers that way as well, especially when we're kind of day in, day out on the computer, really to spend the time to get to know the person that you're speaking to. And my fourth tip is, when in doubt, over communicate. I think it's really important that we start at zero. So assume a level of no knowledge or no context and then build from there, so that you don't kind of start assuming that someone knows a project or piece of work that you're working on and it's required to fill in the blanks. There might be kind of a skills gap there, a knowledge gap, or maybe a lack of confidence to challenge you on all of those steps that you needed to clarify for them, which can then lead to miscommunication, mistakes, missed deadlines, errors, products that go out that may not have needed to go out, all different types of issues. So really start at the baseline and build up from there, and really humble yourself in order to not assume that someone has the knowledge or the information that you have in your brain. over communicate it. And then if you need to scale that back, then it's a good place to be rather than operating the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could end the panel there and be happy with what's been shared. I think that was great. And thank you so much for sharing. We've got some great comments coming through. LinkedIn user, I can't figure out whose name this is, but because we're on the screen here and then the other screen here. So I'm just going to find out who has said this and share with you if I can. But either way, really like this comment. I appreciate Maya's authenticity and she's sharing. Connects experience due to movements. She refrained from participating in discussions due to confidence in the past. What resonates with me is a simple fact that illustrates how personal growth is a continuous journey. And then we also have, I think that's from Akua. So thank you so much. For some reason, it's not showing up on screen. So that's quite annoying. We have Alex who says, love, we're talking about cultural context. Coming from Mexico, English is not the first language. I get the challenges. How do you make sure communication takes place in counting cultural nuances, especially when you're joining a new workplace and moving countries? Super interesting. And I think one thing to also realize is your communication styles change over time based on pressure, your health, your mental health, physical, emotional well-being, financial well-being. Recently, I felt that my communication style has evolved, good or bad, and definitely kind of more productive for the better, especially as I'm trying to communicate by email and trying to do new business, which is a whole different style of communication. 2, we're trying to make sure that we're checking in with people, not burning out. And 3, you've got a team to manage, but also family, friends, and responsibilities in the background. And I find that actually navigating those different worlds and code switching can often be really tiresome, and we don't talk about that enough. It's not just you're communicating, it's you're actually switching different codes of communication depending on who you're speaking to. And I don't know about you, but my brain hurts at the end of the day when that happens. And I think what I believe is, though the technological world, the COVID world, has really amplified and enhanced the relationships that we can build. Like, all of you, we've basically met off a version of the internet or a version of technological, and then we've built relationships, which I think is fundamental and actually a really key point of the app that we're launching. But I would say is then you do feel hyper productive and you do feel like you have to show up and you have to communicate and you have to post online, you have to create content, you have to check in, you have to talk to people, you have to obviously always be communicating, and it's really tiresome. So how do you rest when you are code switching and figuring out all of these different ways to communicate, different people to communicate to, different mediums that you're using? And I guess a secondary point to that question is, what therefore do you think we can be doing to minimize the various channels we're working through and really to focus and prioritize on the ones that are really going to create value, right? Because things are really noisy right now. So in 2 parts, one is how do you rest, especially when you're experiencing over communication burnout and code switching. And the second part is, so what do you think the future looks like when it comes to communication? Because for me, it doesn't look like being everywhere at all times, right? Because I think people are tired of that. Maya, I'm going to bring that to you first, and then Sarah, and then Elisa.
Thank you, Sonia. You made some really, really great points there. How do I rest? And actually, this is some advice that, as you were sharing that, I was like, Sonia's given me some advice before. When it came to, actually, no, I think this might be the second. This is answering the second point, but kind of also the first. But Sonia, you gave me some advice years ago around, you don't have to be on every single social media, like just pick like 1 or 2 and like do that well, rather than, just engaging with all of them and trying to get your message out and build your brand and build your platform kind of on all of them. So for your second question, it is like pick maybe 1 channel and do that well and kind of master that. And maybe you might want to build on top of that. In terms of how I rest, I do post quite consistent, and this is thinking again back to like LinkedIn, I post quite consistently, but actually I no longer pressure myself to be posting like 3 times a week. And when I was on the LinkedIn Creator Accelerator program, it was a 6-week program, and it was like, you must post at least, well, not must, nothing would have happened, but you should be posting 3 times a week for this accelerator program. And obviously it was a program that I'd signed up for and got onto. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. But actually there were some times where I was like, I literally there's nothing in my brain that I want to post about. And I think just giving myself the kindness and allowing myself, like, today I don't want to communicate or in certain ways, and today I don't want to post, and that's actually okay, because I don't want to put rubbish content out there that I'm just writing for the sake of it, because I think that really shows as well. And I do see people quite recently on LinkedIn just posting every single day, and I'm just reading it and I'm like, honestly, like, this is rubbish. Like, number one, did you actually write this? ChatGPT has clearly written this for you and you haven't even like reshaped it. And it's just nothing. It's not giving me anything. And there's so much noise. And Sonia, when we spoke recently, I was like, the world is so noisy. There's, you know, all your social media channels, but also email, Slack, Teams, just everything. And it's great for like communication and kind of engaging with people and building connections, but actually it's just so noisy sometimes. So what I kind of try and do, and I guess this does help with my own well-being, is like, let me just put out stuff when I'm feeling like putting stuff out there, but also let me not just add noise for the sake of just adding noise and adding my voice somewhere. And that's just not just on kind of social media and LinkedIn, but also like within the workplace. You know, there are, you know, sometimes there are people just talk for the sake of talking and try and make noise for the sake of kind of making noise. But for me, I'm like, I will say something when I have a point which I want to make and that I think is interesting and valuable and relevant, right? But I'm not just going to make noise for the sake of it. And I think that's really crucial in terms of like giving yourself the space to like not feel pressured just to like over communicate all the time.
I couldn't agree more with you, Maya. I think I'm almost not posting enough at all on LinkedIn. So I know that that is an area of growth that I need to work on. However, I'm not just going to post for the sake of posting. It's quality over quantity, right? And there's no point in just adding to noise. So what I'm thinking about is, what is my own personal brand that I want to build on the platform of LinkedIn? And I have to decide what is the content that I want to then represent that, right? So I'm in the middle of that, my own development journey in that space. In regards to rest, I take micro breaks during the day. So my number one asset that I've heard from my family, from my friends, etc., as well as people at the workplace, is that I bring a lot of really good energy. But the thing about energy, and my current manager has been very open with me on this, is you can't be going 200% of the time on every single thing, Sarah. So you need to prioritize, where are you going to go use that energy? And so I listen to my body. If I'm starting to get run down, I'm tired, which usually happens by the afternoon because I'm on a lot of meetings or projects in the morning, I take a break. I go for a short walk. I go listen to something. I just walk around. I do a stretch break, but I have to protect my energy because it's my differentiator. So my advice would be to listen to your body, listen to what you need. It's telling you something, and to lean into that and find your own strategy for how are you going to regain some of that energy back. Are you drinking enough water? Are you taking enough breaks? Are you moving your body enough throughout the day?
Yeah, really good points there, I think, by both Sarah and Maya. For me, as a communications manager in my full-time job, and I also run my own business as a freelance writer in my spare time, I'm constantly communicating on a professional level. So when it comes to rest for me, I actually prefer not to communicate at all. I actually want the complete opposite. I'm actually quite an introverted person. I have had to overcome a lot of natural shyness in order to be an effective networker, to speak on panels like this, and to go outside of my comfort zone, to make new friends and build relationships with people. So for me, rest really just means going silent. My Instagram is private. I'm not great at posting on LinkedIn, and that actually works for me. Similar to Maya, I actually see a lot of people in my network kind of posting because they think that that's what LinkedIn rewards them for, but actually they're missing the point there. The point of communication is to add value. So if you're not adding any value, there's nothing to say, and that's also okay. In such a noisy world, as Maya mentioned, silence is actually a very valuable commodity as well. So if you can give that silence first to yourself, you'll only show up better and bigger for yourself and the people around you. So I think being authentic to yourself, what you really need, and recognizing that social media is a highlight reel. It's not real life. It's just a very, very deliberately curated set of content pieces that someone has chosen to show you. You don't always get to see what's behind the scenes. So for me, what really energizes me is having one-to-one conversations with people who are close to me, close friends, close colleagues, my partner, my family, people who know me, and who I can really be myself around. I find that that gives me a lot of energy as well.
Thank you. Am I unmuted? I am unmuted. Sorry. Honestly, despite being online for the last few years, it's also really hard to remember to unmute yourself and also to meet yourself when you need to meet yourself. And I think that is just tech in itself. We've raised some really great points and we've had some great comments come through. Great share from the speakers. Thank you very much. I recommend that individuals occasionally pause their content creation efforts, ensuring the protection of their mental health well-being. Always consider the value of content, whether it's not in support of your message objectives when posting. Communication is an art. And for those who are asking if this is recorded and you can listen back, yes, absolutely. This is available on YouTube and LinkedIn. And at some point when we download it, it will be available on Spotify and Apple as a podcast. I don't know timelines for that yet because we have a lot of stuff going on, but hopefully within the next 7 days. I would say that I'm really, really, really grateful that we've had a really transparent and honest conversation, that we've kind of taken it away from just talking about the general nonsense when it comes to communication. I say nonsense because it's noisy, and I say nonsense because I too am someone who is full of energy and I'm full of life. But one thing that I'm finessing is I have this muscle, which is my voice, and I'm learning how to take a step back. I'm learning how to better my listening and up that mode and down my talking. And, you know, you do that through practice, interviewing, podcasting, speaking to people, reading books, enjoying yourself, taking yourself out in nature. And I think there's a big part of learning. But then you have the fear of missing out. And sometimes you have the fear of missing out because what it seems like is the loudest person in the room, which used to be me, isn't really me anymore, normally gets the opportunities. And it's like, well, no, actually, based on what Maya said, it's not the loudest person in the room now. It's just person who's just there and everywhere and adding like content for the sake of content. But you made a really great point that I want to touch on, was you said something along the lines of, well, all of you said it's not adding value, but Maya, you particularly said, well, ChatGPT is now in the game. ChatGPT has changed everything. Or has it? Because it has been around for a while. It's just everyone now thinks they're not only a ChatGPT expert, but also they think that they can just go on ChatGPT, create the threads, create the trends, post it online, and they're going to get something from it. And obviously we speak a lot about LinkedIn, and LinkedIn are definitely not sponsoring this, but LinkedIn, we are available. You know, we do a lot for you. The amount of people that we have helped get onto your platform, all I'm just going to say is that's pure communication, right? We're ready. We're ready for that support and sponsorship. But I think the point I'm trying to make is also the content pieces on LinkedIn just look the same. It's the same opening caption. It's 2 spaces. It's a bunch of text. It's questions. It's not really doing anything for anyone. And recently, just today, actually, the news, there's been reports around the education system where communication is where you're basically, you know, your first form of communication, that teachers know that students are using tools like ChatGPT to better their communication, to go into their essays, to write articles. So what do you think the future of communication looks like when you have tools like ChatGPT being able to make you a blogger, a writer, a freelancer, a podcaster, an author overnight? Like, is that real success? Is it cheating when it comes to communication? Is it temporary? I mean, I appreciate we can have another hour just on this topic, but I just wanted to touch on it because we brought it up. And I'm just going to kind of let the first person roll with it, and then we'll start to wrap up quickly.
I'm happy to jump in. So, I mean, I look at ChatGPT and other AI platforms, tools, they're tools, right? AI is changing every single industry, every single job. And although it is a bit scary at times, the only way forward is through. So I think trying out these technologies, not being afraid to understand them, to use them, get your hands dirty, but not to lose yourself in those tools, because you are the value, right? And so not just relying on what is the output from this system, but what is your own point of view? a lot of communications is developing your own point of view, right? So I would say lean into it, learn it, use it, but don't lose yourself in that process, and make sure that you're consistently delivering messages that align to who you are. We've talked a lot about authenticity. What is your brand? What is your value that you want to deliver to your audience? And is it truly good enough to just take the output from something like a ChatGPT and spit it out? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, before Elisa comes in, sorry, lean, learn, use, don't lose yourself. I feel like at some point there's going to be on some t-shirt or slogan of ours. So I've put it in the caption. Great little format. It's going to be an Instagram caption probably within the next few days, just so that you're aware.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that ChatGPT and other generative AI tools, honestly, they're built by humans, which means that those tools are also flawed. So you may have seen in the news, actually, the way that AI actually works is that it learns from what it's been given. So if the person who has programmed AI has, let's say, a racial bias or an unconscious bias around certain genders or any type of discrimination in any form, any type of bias, that then will resonate in its output. So there's quite a lot of guardrails as well that can help protect you from relying too much on those tools and getting an output that would be irresponsible or incorrect or inaccurate to share. So I think very much echoing Sarah, it's a tool that's there, but to know exactly how it works and what its limitations are. Ultimately, we're all human. The way that we communicate is mostly nonverbal, to be honest. The way that we are as humans, as society, the way that we connect with one another. Technology has made us very much more individualistic and almost isolated in that way. And in my view, AI has the potential to take us further down that path. But if you're able to use AI for its merits, as almost like a form of saving time, to become more efficient, to get some ideas, to learn what's out there, to summarize some information and use it responsibly, it can be a brilliant tool for you to use that can save you time, that can set you up well. But don't forget that you also have a brain. Don't forget what communication really is about, is transmitting a message successfully from point A to point B. And there's very much the potential for that message to get lost if you're not careful about the method of transmission. So by being really mindful about it, it can actually be a really useful tool that can help improve what you're doing. But at the same time, there are dangers as well to be aware of, to use it responsibly.
I don't really have much to add, to be honest, which is why I didn't jump in straight away after Elisa. I did my whole dissertation looking at artificial intelligence and the disproportionate impact that it can have on marginalized groups. So if anyone is interested in reading more, I can link that in the comments. But even there was one recently where something asked AI to create Barbie from like different countries, and it just like was full of Barbie's already kind of full of stereotypes, but like the AI had created so many stereotypes of these Barbies based on like these countries. So like Barbies holding guns from particular countries and so on. So to Elisa's point, I think it's really important that you challenge AI, and like if we go back to the ChatGPT, it's like challenge what it's spitting out at you, and don't take it as like this is 100% fact and this must be true because it came out of this really cool tool. No, you need to challenge it because the data is flawed, and it could be kind of putting out absolute nonsense. So really do challenge it. But I guess my final piece, and I said it earlier, is like, please don't just like ask ChatGPT, write me a 100-word LinkedIn post on communication and copy and paste it and post it. Like I honestly saw a post today that was clearly ChatGPT, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, yeah, get inspiration from it, reword it, take some points. That's great. It speeds up your thought process and whatever. Use it for research, use it as a replacement for Google, but please don't be copying and pasting. Like it's not a vibe.
I love that. Thank you. And just on that note, so that people are aware, ChatGPT only really has data till 2021. So even if you are using it as Google, just understand that it might not be the most relevant. But I guess what we've also touched on is key themes like critical thinking. Is communication more necessary than coding? Probably no, it's not. It's more necessary. It's that you need to be able to communicate so that you can transfer and translate your code. Is communication a key skill by itself? Yes, but there's different mediums of communication, from blog writing to writing code, all the way to listening, learning, leaning in, launching podcasts, managing teams, being a leader, having this discussion with your friends and family. Think about what your core skills are and how you're going to build up that muscle. So if you're great already at communicating, how do you build up that muscle and strengthen it, but also take time out so you don't burn it? At the same time, the world is noisy. Okay, there is a lot. I mean, we've spoken about LinkedIn, Instagram, Slack, articles, blogs, apps, WhatsApp, Twitter, and ChatGPT just in this conversation. And we've only been here for 45 minutes, right? Those are just some of the social tools that already exist. So think about where your people are, who is your audience, what matters, what value you're adding, and what you also want them to take away. And most importantly, don't lose yourself because you think you need to be a communications queen, king, or master, right? It's just about, is it authentic? Is it aligned with what I need to do? Do I know what I don't know? If I don't know, how do I find that information through role models, representation, mentors, friends, networks, following the right people online? But don't feel like you need to have everything in order. And I think the last thing that I really want to touch on, and one thing that we've said continuously, is communication skills are evolving. They are evolving, not just based on the tools we're using, but the human life and our everyday basic necessity needs and nice to haves. And so go and level yourself up, learn what the recent trends are, and make sure that you have clear value points to add on things that you know. And where you don't know, just listen and learn. And going back to Sarah's one-liner, right? Tagline: lean, learn, use, and don't lose yourself. So thank you so much for listening. Panelists, thank you so much for joining us. Audience members, thank you so much for being here. I love the fact that we're getting so many comments where people are like, thank you so much. I love this discussion whilst eating my lunch. That's it. That's all we need. That is all we need, right? We show up because you keep asking us to show up. Trust me, more times than not, I'm like, I want to quit. And then something cool happens with LMF. And I'm like, no, we have to carry on. And on that note, the very exciting thing is that we are launching this app. This app is going to help you connect with different profiles, find people close to you who you can network with, find your mentors and mentees, have communication channels so you can have those really safer spaces to ask questions that you don't necessarily want to talk to your managers about. But most importantly, give you a sense of belonging and community, which I think, given this noisy world, is fundamentally ironic that we're so connected and yet we're so isolated at the same time. So if you'd like to get involved with the app, give us your comments, tell us what we should be launching and building, because we're doing it from scratch, and get a free trial. Join the form. We've sent this in the comments, so we'll send it to everyone listening as well. On that note, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to connect with our great speakers. We'll have more information that we're going to send out from them and make sure that they are part of our network. And if you are interested in getting involved with the LMF Network and or the next Life Skills Summit, just drop us a line. Speakers, panelists, on that note, do you have any last bits that you want to add before we end this broadcast? And it's okay if you don't. Thumbs up, thumbs down is completely fine. But
just thank you. It was a lot of fun, and hope we can continue the dialogue. So looking